All right, it seems we are ready to get started. Might be talking a little bit slow. I have a bit of a delay here. So, but thank you all for joining us today as the audience is with us already. Everybody's let in. Oh, so we're ready to go. The audience is with us already. Oh, hello, everybody. Oh, this is the camera. Hello, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for joining us today. You know, we've had some technical difficulties, but the ship is on course. My name is Jason Fitzroy Jeffers. I'm so delighted to be here for Getting Real 22. I am the founding director of Third Horizon. And I'm really happy to be moderating this conversation, Shifting Territories, Filmmakers Facing Crisis. I'll read a bit about our panel today. What is the reality of the filmmaker living in a country in crisis? From authoritarianism and occupation to economic collapse to war, many documentarians face extreme challenges in their everyday lives and work. And when these filmmakers are forced to leave their countries of origin and relocate elsewhere, they often face a new set of challenges, including a global north with expectations of being served up authentic trauma and pain by these artists. Featuring directors and producers from different countries across the globe, this event focuses on the ways and means by which filmmakers show their resilience and their ability to thrive as they negotiate the most difficult of circumstances to get their work made and seen. So we have a lovely panel here today. I'm going to start by reading everybody's bios. Here with me in the IDA offices, Boris Prieto Perez Baroto. Boris is a Spanish-Cuban producer and distributor based in Paris, France. He holds a degree in computer science from the University of Havana and in film production from the École Supérieure d'Études Cinématographiques in Paris. With his own production company, Vega Alta Films, he co-produced the hybrid feature film, I Want to Make a Movie by Yamit Ramirez. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yes. In 2021, he co-produced the documentary short Abissal by Alejandro Alonso, which had its world premiere at Visions to Real, and subsequently won the Golden Dove at Doc Leipzig 2021 and the John Hope Franklin Humanities Institute Award at Full Frame. He's currently developing the hybrid feature film entitled The Star by Alejandro Alonso, which is already supported by the IDFA Bertha Fund. He is also working on the virtual reality documentary project, The Eyes of Mila Chaos by Yamit Ramirez, which obtained the Numerical Experiences Development Fund from the CNC in France and participated, among others, in the Venice Gap financing market, as well as the New Images co-production market in Paris. Wash, thank you for
nice to be here, Jason, with you, with this panel.
Nice, nice. Next up, we have Rokhsareh Maghami. Is Rokhsareh, did I pronounce that correctly? Or good enough, at least. Two-time Sundance winning documentary filmmaker, Rokhsareh, sorry, this delay is really, yeah. Rokhsareh Maghami studied filmmaking and animation at Tehran Art University. Her research on animated documentary resulted in a book, Animated Documentary, A New Way to Express. Her documentary, Sonita, won the Grand Jury Prize and Audience Award from Sundance Film Festival 2016. Rokhsareh's main focus in her documentaries is people who live at the margins of society. She is interested in experimentation with hybrid forms and pushing the boundaries of conventional documentary. Outsider art, drama therapy, and experimental animation are her other interests. Rokhsareh has been a jury member at festivals such as Hot Docs, IDFA, One World Human Rights Festival, Athens International Film Festival, and Clermont-Ferrand Film Festival. She's living in Berlin, Germany now. Agnia and Igor. Igor, I'm missing a bio for you, I hate to say, but
I can introduce myself.
Yes, if you, thank you.
Yeah, my name is Igor. I'm a documentary film producer. Most recently, I co-produced Welcome to Chechnya that premiered at Sundance 2020 Film Festival, as well as Berlin, and is available on HBO. And now I'm working with Agnia on a new feature-length documentary called Queendom.
Great.
Working title.
Well, thank you for joining us. And Agnia, I do have yours, I can read yours. Agnia Galdenova is a Sundance and IDFA supported documentary film director. Her first feature-length documentary, One Step Forward, One Step Back, about a family's dream to live far from civilization in the Alta mountains, premiered at the Message to Man International Film Festival. She's currently directing Queendom, a feature-length documentary set to release in 2023. Thank you, Agnia. All right, deep breath, everybody. Let's start with it. All right. So let's begin. Rokhsareh, let's start with you. Or I should preface this by saying, you know, the panel is titled, subtitled Filmmakers Facing Crisis. And one of the things that we're interested in talking about today is that it's you know, very often the case that we frame filmmakers living and working in contested or contentious spaces as being in crisis. But when they emigrate to another country here in the global north to continue their work, even if they have closer access to funding or financing or producer support, the work and the life of being an immigrant filmmaker can be one in which they're faced with just as much crisis. And so we're interested in exploring both sides of that, what the entire trajectory looks like and how they're navigating it, or what lessons can we glean from that, and how can we continue to shape the industry around them to be more accommodating and supportive. Rokhsareh, I'm really, we had a chance to speak a few days ago about your journey. You're living in Germany these days, and I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about your path from Iran to Germany and the impact this journey has had on your practice. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry, you're muted.
I'm so happy to be here with you and your audience, and this very interesting topic that I've never been asked before about. Like, I'm born and raised in Iran, and 7 years ago, after I made Sonita, I mean, I've been making documentaries since 2000, so most of my adult life I've been making documentaries in Iran, where you can't get, they don't like you to get fundings from abroad. There is a huge censorship and it's one of the almost the only theocracy in the world is Iran regime. These days you hear what's happening there. So as a filmmaker there, you will face a lot of censorship, persecution, control. They try everything so you cannot make a movie. If you get money from abroad, then they will tell you you are a spy, you are working for them, you are trying to sell the soul of the country, you are, and then they don't fund you. So I've been making movies in that situation for 20 years. I don't know how, but I did. And then after I made Sonita, I couldn't get back for a while. I mean, I left the country for premiere, and I found I'm not gonna come back. But then I stayed in the United States, and that was the darkest time of my filmmaking life. Like all those 20 years, it was easier for me, like, because I made movies, even if I didn't have, I was living in a basement, but I was making movies. It was a productive time. But in the US, I faced the real, and then Sonita won 2 Sundance Awards. So you would think life would be easier for me. It got the worst ever. I couldn't really work because I didn't have access to Iran, and if you don't have access to Iran, you're Iranian, then you are not good for anything. You can't really, like, you're not an artist, you're not a creative person. They will treat you like, oh, you can't go back, bye-bye, because you cannot go and bring us the painful stories we need from Iran. And you cannot, you know, and what they need is a distributor once told me that we need disasters from Iran. You can't just make a normal film. We don't need that. So if you cannot go and bring disasters from Iran, you are not good for anything else. So it was very difficult. The way of understanding documentary in the US is like archive and interview, and my style is mainly observation and following somebody in a long time, and that that is not something that I could find funders or anybody who was interested. It was a difficult time. And then I managed to move to Germany, which was a much better, started a better chapter in my life. And I'm working on 2 documentaries here. I mean, I managed to somehow get access to Iran, and yeah, but then still, probably in 2 weeks, I'm going to Afghanistan in this situation, because still, that's the only way that I am supposed to make movies. I should go risk my life all the time. But still, in Germany, there is a system. There is a huge, very well-funded TV system, and a better understanding of what the documentary is, like understanding of observational documentaries in TV system, in funding system. So my life is at least I have a life, because in the US I didn't have any creative life. I was like kind of like, I don't know what to do really. So now I'm back to making movies, and I'm much happier. And yeah, that's my journey. I don't know if I answered your question.
Well, no, well, thank you for being you absolutely did, and thank you for being so vulnerable and forthright about what that experience has been like. Could you share with us a bit of what you wish, how the conversations with funders differ in the US versus what you're experiencing in Europe, and what you wished you may have experienced when you were over here?
I wish that when I was in the US, like, I wish that they could talk to me. I mean, if you, knowing that I can't get back to Iran at that point, I couldn't. And I wish that they would treat me as a creative person, not as a smuggler of painful political stories, and really talk to me, not funders, producers, talk to me as a creative person who can tell stories and can tell maybe a different story, or spend a bit of time with me and understand and try to help me to find my direction, a new direction, instead of, as I have always faced in the US, like going and being aggressive and seeing if there is anything for you there. And if I don't have anything for them, like right now, I can't go back to Iran and make a movie about how things are bad there, just leaving me there and say goodbye and go to the next person. Like, it was like, I was surprised by what even the people who knew me never had any time and space to imagine something different from what I had done before, and see that, or understand my new situation, like, oh, you can't go back, bye-bye. And that was really painful. And you know, like, yeah, and then I can't change the whole understanding of funding in a country, that you have to go and find rich people, so they will give you some, and get a fiscal sponsorship, and then they give you some money so they don't pay, like they get tax thing, and then when you see a rich person, you should jump and go and talk to them. That's not how I don't like rich people. So that was another problem, really. I guess I want to go and tell a rich person, see, I think that you've stolen somebody's money. You cannot be that rich otherwise. So that never worked for me, really. But yeah, like no understanding of, no empathy. Like, lack of empathy is something you can see even in American documentaries. You never see, very rarely you can see a character-driven documentary with a person you need to 90 minutes to know, because nobody has time for that. Nobody has that kind of interest. That's something that happens in European filmmaking. But for American filmmaking, that requires too much empathy nobody has. So sorry for my, like, I don't have,
the empathy is something that we're going to come back to in a little bit later in the conversation.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah, lack of empathy, lack of, like, everything is issue centered. Yeah, you should talk about issues and not being focused on people, because nobody is interested in humans, like a human. That's what I want to do. I want to focus on one person, fall in love with that, make everybody fall in love with that person in 90 minutes. That's my job. That's what I know how to do. That's not how they do it.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing that. Agnia and Igor, I'd like to come to you next. You know, you're working on quite a challenging project right now, and I know that there are some limitations around what you can share with us today. But could you tell us a bit about Queendom and some of the obstacles and challenges that you are facing currently?
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting us to participate in this panel. I think it's a very important topic right now because many filmmakers are facing difficulties in this time, and it doesn't progress in a good way. It progresses only in a worse and worse way every day. So I think it's very important to speak about our challenges. Well, Igor, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to say, just as like a quick introduction, I was born and raised in Russia and left Russia when I was after high school, and then studied journalism in Bulgaria, and then I went to the US as a gay person. I knew I couldn't have a life in Russia, but I was still interested in stories about Russia. And Welcome to Chechnya came sort of from that interest. And then through that, I met Agnia, and you were already working on Queendom for a few years. That was about more than a year ago that we met. And I think, there was challenges, right? Working on this kind of film in Russia. But I think everything changed for much, much worse when Russia invaded Ukraine in February. And I'll let you continue.
Yeah, well, I decided to make this film quite a long time ago. And in the beginning, it was a completely different story with several protagonists. And my wish was to go across Russia and to find several drag queens and to tell their stories, because me too, I'm the person who is not an interview-based documentary filmmaker. I'm really into making films about people and go and dive in someone's story and as been said before, make your audience, allow your audience to see this little glimpse of someone's life somewhere far away where you would never go. And that's why initially I decided to do documentaries, because through the making one, you're able to travel wherever you want and to tell any kind of stories. And for me particular, this topic was very important because it's very close to my heart and my family. My niece did a transition to nephew, and so I know from my personal story how hard it can be to live in this kind of positions in a country that doesn't allow you to do so. And myself, I also got bitten in Moscow for the way how I look like, because people were like two men walking on the street and thought that I'm a guy in a skirt, so they decided to beat me up. So a lot of things, and I have like 90% of my friends are LGBTQ plus people, and I know how it is hard and unbearable sometimes to break through. So for me, it was very clear that I have the wish and I have the instruments to speak about this community in Russia. So I started to look for protagonists in 2019, and that's when I met Jenna, and everything turned, because when we met, I realized that I don't need any other protagonist, and I'm going to focus on one person's story. And that's where we started.
Yes, Well, thank you. Thank you again for joining us, because I know it's I know there are some safeguards around how much you can speak about. There's some general questions I'm going to want to come back to everybody, but I'm going to move to Boris now. So you have a unique situation. You're based in Paris, but you've been working and are working with Cuban filmmakers who have been gradually leaving the island. And can you speak a bit about, I guess, the challenges of making a film in Cuba, but then the challenges of a Cuban filmmaker leaving and still being, driven by this desire to tell the stories about where they're from, even if they are hampered or challenged in their ability to go back and
Okay. Yes, I'm Cuban myself, so that's the easy connection with Cuban filmmakers. And the idea is that when I meet all these filmmakers, they were still in Cuba. And I'm talking about period of 3 years. So in 3 years, almost all the filmmakers, not just them, people who I'm working with, but a lot of filmmakers are leaving the country in the last 2 years. And it's, yes, it's very interesting what you say about confronting a different way of producing. In Cuba, talking with Alejandro Alonso, he's a filmmaker, and he told me in Cuba he has some kind of accessibility to people to make movies, for example, to make documentaries, sorry. And it was the good part, because in Cuba, the system people doesn't have a relationship with the property as we have in Europe, for example, or whatever else. And people are more freedom to talk, to unveil their situation, even being very friendly with the camera. And this was a good part to make films in Cuba. But as you maybe know, for many, many years, all the Cuban production was centralized on the ICAIC. It's a center for cinema in Cuba. And of course, they control what is done. And there is a lot of censorship. With the democratization of cameras and things in the 20s, and a kind of independent cinema started. And but they always have the problem to what subjects you can talk about, and especially the visibility of their films. So probably they can do the films because there are no control, but maybe after that you don't have a movie theater to put your film, or even you don't have the structures inside to distribute your cinema outside. And that's changing right now at this moment, but it was really very difficult. So these people are produce and work in situations where you can make films with maybe for short films 5,000 euros. For feature films can go to 10 or 15, you can make a film without any problem. And they have 10 years ago, they have 2 funds to make their film. So it was really easy because you obtain the fund, you make your film, 5,000 euros or dollars, and you finish. And when they move away, because there is a special situation right now in Cuba, they are losing hope in the facility to create. They are in this climax of awareness about what you can do, what you can express, something broken there. So they are leaving the country. And right now they are confronted to the fact to produce differently. And for example, in the case of Alejandro, he told me the other day it was an advantage for him to start working with me as a French producer, knowing the Cuban reality, and adapt slowly to a new way of producing. And right now he's less than a year spending in Spain, and he's learning to work differently.
And when you say, I'm sorry, when you say work differently, what does that look like? Is it pace? Is it funding?
Yes, it's the tempo of the film. And for example, him when he was in Cuba, he made a film at a time. So he started with the project, he ended, and after that he started a second project, for example. When you are here, like you must spend maybe 2 years to find funds to make all the production and stuff. You can't work with just one film because creativity is not explored. You can as a creator, you can't really work with just one project will your 2 years to be done. So he's learning, for example, to work with multiple projects at the same time. Maybe obvious for a lot of people, but for Cuban guys, it's not this way. Cuban people, sorry. Yes, that's one point. After that, for example, he's confronted to the importance of markets, scholarships, residencies. It's a whole process that to allow to have visibility about the project that is completely new for them. So it's very interesting and challenging. For documentaries especially, it's a little bit unnatural to work this way because he works with the momentum, with the characters. He finds some way he find a miracle, but he wants to make a film about it. And if you must adapt to 2 years of production, maybe the miracle has gone. So it's the negative part of working differently. It's not just good or bad. It's really different.
It's a different world, really.
Yeah, he needs to learn to work this way, for example.
Right, right. Well, you just mentioned something that I'd like to, bring to everybody on the panel. You mentioned how much effort is going into navigating the festivals and the markets, and I'd like to come back to Agnia and Igor, and then bring it back to Rokhsareh and Boris. What is it, how do you safeguard your, making a film is almost an impossible task on its own. But then there is also the work of going out there and continually having to speak about it, even as you're doing right now, to continually share the challenges, the pain, the frustrations. How do you strike a balance between the work and then speaking about the work for funders, for people who may be interested in supporting you? And I mean, in terms of your mental health, the well-being of your collaborators. How do you strike that balance and take care of yourself?
Well, it's a very, very good question in these days, but how to strike the balance? Honestly, I don't know, because right now we're very unbalanced, and the only thing is making me keep going is that, I have film to finish, and I have a very great team to do it. So that's the main thing that's keep me going, because honestly, the last months are a bit unstable. So yeah, I wanted to say something about the financing and everything. How is it happening?
Yes.
Because I was listening and I started to think about it, and I wanted to say that doing documentary in Russia, there are, in my experience, there are two ways: or you do everything by yourself, and that's what I've been taught in a school that I graduated in Moscow. It's a great place, founded by a person called Marina Razbeshkina, and her main point is that the more independent you are, the best. So if you can produce, direct, film, do the sound and edit by yourself, then you're in a way safe, because you are not dependent on anyone, and you don't need to, you You don't need to fundraise. And now, as much as it's here, like in the Western countries. So that's what I've been doing before. But with this project, and after we met with Igor, I realized how limited we are with this position, because you're doing everything. And speaking also about balance, even if it's not a film about the war or about some like very dangerous or horrible circumstances, it's still a huge amount of work without any support, because, you know, most of the documentary filmmakers don't want to take money from the government in Russia, or like would think twice to do that. And in my personal example, I'm very happy that I never touched this ground. So I'm learning right now, currently with this project, how to deal with all the, you know, fundraising. And I'm very happy that we're collaborating with Igor on that, because he's way more experienced than me. And I'm thankful for that. Speaking about balance, I don't know, like we are, yeah, it really depends of who is in your team. And I'm very lucky to be able to speak beyond you know, editing or any things that we have to discuss about the producing, to speak just as a person to person, and to discuss all the problems that we have on the way. So I don't go to psychologist yet.
Just to add really quick, yeah, I think because it's so personal to us, the work that we do, that I don't know how you can like have that balance, because it is so personal, and that's like the reason why we do it. So we kind of, I guess, we just embrace it, and that was what's driving us. And then, like Agnia said, having good people around you and good team members, and having a very clear, transparent communication is like so important. And that keeps us like grounded and keeps us going, moving forward. But also like realizing where, you know, like what Boris was saying, so sort of similar to the when Agnia and I met online, right? You were still in Russia and I was in the US, and then you had to relocate together with the main protagonist. So I also you also have to realize like the power dynamics, and have to figure out like what's the focus right now, and how to shift it from like this one thing to this very important thing that's happening right now, and then move forward. So if it makes sense what I'm saying. But yeah, having really good people around you is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Rokhsareh, anything that you know, with a journey that has had so many different twists and turns, you know, how have you been able to safeguard your own, you know, your own well-being? I mean, I guess, you know, you deciding to leave to go to Germany in itself was
I wasn't able to safeguard my mental health or anything. So I just wasn't. Yeah, it's a very unhealthy job. Like documentary filmmaking is a very unhealthy job. It's in every level. It's not good for mental health. I don't know if I'm very curious to know how people can safeguard their mental health. I can't. And also something that is very annoying is that you are not measured by, so always with Middle Eastern or filmmakers of the Southern world, we get together and we say that we need our own festivals, our own fundings, and our own values of filmmaking, and we cannot, till when we should measure ourselves with this European Western meters, and then making movies and showing to them. And we really don't have access to our own audience usually. Like the people in the southern world don't watch documentaries. You don't really have access to them, and that's something that's one of the reasons that makes me always sad and is not good for my mental health, is that I always have to it's just, that's the reality of the world, that this job is in a way that you don't make movies to the audience that you wish you could reach, and then you cannot fund it by the, you have to fund it by when you fund the movie by some people, you have to make them like it, and then somehow they're the ones who will at the end watch it. So that's one of the many things that are not very, I wish it would be different. Yeah.
Boris, to you.
Yes, well, in my case, as a producer, I'm not a creator myself, so from the beginning it was like that, to work with funds, to take your time, to build the project, to adapt it. And what is interesting to me is that to create a relationship is like a marriage. I try to protect a lot Alejandro, for example, because it's hard. It's hard to adapt your way to create. You spend a lot of time not making the movie, but preparing the movie. And yes, it's like a friendship. Try to protect him, to measure the efforts I need to ask for. And but the most important is to understand why we are doing that and why it's necessary. And that's easier. But it's not always easy to do for the mental health, especially for the creator. But we try, and it's a matter of confidence or not confidence to believe that the people who is working with you is there for your good, not for something else. The project is the most important. The people is the most important too. So that's the way to work. That's the way to take time to go to search for funds.
Right. What do you all wish, and this is for everybody, whoever wants to chime in first, but what do you wish programmers understood? Program funders to a lesser extent, but let's all, we've been speaking about funders a lot, but programmers, what do you wish programmers understood about the work that you do? Is that something that you found in any way to be an obstacle, or, because I think part of what we're navigating here is going back to empathy, as Rokhsareh was saying, is that levels of empathy along this journey, right? People being interested, but not necessarily empathetic. What do you wish people understood about what it is you do that doesn't necessarily maybe seem immediately apparent to them?
But about programmers, you mean?
Program, yeah.
Well, I think when you know a little bit about the whole picture, you can't make pleasure to everybody. So you must know who the programmers are or what the festivals are looking for, and you adapt your work to that. And in my case, I make distributions or the films I produce too. So I'm trying to build a know-how of how programs works and function. So I adapt that to, I send the films to the festivals I know will accept or will be some way will be interested about the movie I'm proposing.
Right.
So that's the idea. Adapt to the places who can't be a good audience for your film, for example.
Right.
And it's very interesting because, for example, for the films I make with Alejandro, and as Rokhsareh said before, the situation here in the States is completely different to Europe. The kind of films they are doing and the kind of films they are looking for in the festival. But it's not all the time like that. You can find festivals that are completely adapted to the kind of films we produce. For example, Full Frame or Dosha in Canada, or it's possible. Just you need to know what kind of festival would be a good audience for your film.
Right. And, you know, some context to the question, the reason I'm asking this is because it's so, you know, it's very easy to just focus on the funding aspect, but of course, so often our funding depends on what our last success was, right? And if our last work wasn't being seen in certain spaces, are we now eligible for funding? You know, Rokhsareh, Igor, Agnia, anybody care to chime in on the issue of programming and be it past work or hopes for future work? No, nobody.
I think Igor knows
Well,
more.
Well,
that.
I don't know. I think I wish maybe that they would sort of understand. I'm generalizing, but that they would understand that you know, obviously it's a film is a film, but there's also so much that goes beyond that and around that. And I feel like some of the festivals are sort of really drawn to this very sensationalist cinema, and I sort of understand where it comes from. The audiences are declining, that goes into movie theaters, right? We need to bring them back. But I think if you really step away from that they're still going to be very much interested in cinema. And if you know, instead of bringing those very sensationalist stories that, you know, grab attention immediately, maybe you create, I don't know, more around than just showing the film, having, you know, a panel right after or before with the protagonists. I think that's very important to bring them to the front and not to hide them. So I think, you know, progressive things like that, it's something I'm aware of. But it's a tricky situation because you also sort of, you want to get into the film festival and you're making the best film that you want to make. And then you have to strike this balance, and you're also thinking about distribution. So it's a lot of things that come into one place. Like with working with Agnia, my goal, you know, for her is to create the best film that she, you know, wants, that she sees, to bring the vision to the fruition. But I also understand the realities of today's landscape of nonfiction cinema, where you know, certain programmers or, let's say, distributors or buyers might not be interested in something that is more that shows less of that sensationalism and more of the human, of the soul of the person that we're filming with.
Well, thank you for actually, you know, that you brought some refinement to my question. Was a bit broad, but that really was what I was hoping to get at, which was the context in which these films are presented is often just as important, right? Because if it's framed in that more sensationalist lens, the nuance behind it and the conversations that we hope to arise from it don't necessarily come about. Do we have? It looks like we're having some action here in the chat. I'm going to keep going, but if anybody has any questions that they would like me to ask of our panelists, please drop them here in the chat. I'd be happy to fish out one or two before we wrap in about 20 minutes. You know, I feel, you know, there's so many things to discuss here, but I want to just kind of open it up to, you know, we had a really interesting chat the other day in preparation. Are there any things that we haven't really touched on yet that you wish to discuss, or you wish to kind of throw into the conversation, any of you? I'm kind of aiming that at you because I know there's, you know, there's so much to talk about. Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to think about something specific. Yes, for example, it's about filmmakers from leaving their countries, leaving their territories of primary territory of creation. The question about what kind of movies you will done or you will will done when you will be outside of your territory. It's very interesting. I discuss a lot about a lot of filmmakers from Cuba, and some way they continue to make films about Cuba. Some way, even if the film talks about something specifically to the territory where they are living, the film always comes back to Cuba by referencing themselves or by comparing the situation of somebody who's out of place, for example. The subject out of place is a real important subject for almost every filmmakers from Cuba I know. And it's very interesting because it's a kind of what founders, what industry professionals are expecting from you. And for example, Alejandro, he spent just 1 year outside of Cuba. For him, it's logical to continue to talk about Cuba because it's the only reality he really knows. But Patricia Perez is a filmmaker who won ITFA 3 years ago with the film called In a Whisper. She spent 20 years in Europe, and some way she continued to make films about Cuba. Her next project is a co-production with Serbia and France and Spain, and she will talk about Cuba too. No? And it's interesting how founders or producers will come to this kind of projects and build co-productions with subjects always going back to Cuba for Cuban filmmakers, and it's very interesting to know what people are expecting from you. Sometimes you will get remarks as, can you concentrate more, please, in the Cuban situation or the political situation? It's the case with the founder, with Patricia, because their film talk about maternity too. They want to talk about women arriving to 40s and not having childs yet. But the fund tell it's fine, but concentrate more in Cuba. And it was some kind of special to this kind of remark. And for example, another example is Alejandro made a film called Terra Nova, who won in Rotterdam, and it's completely financed by the European Union. And it was inside a project called to recognize, for celebrate the 500 years of Havana. And when Alejandro makes a very personal cinema, so the vision he showed about Cuba, about Havana, was nothing at all what European Union was expecting about Cuba. There was no colors, there was no happiness, no music. And it was very difficult to make accept to the founders of the film that's the Havana too. That's my Havana. That's what I want to show to other people. And it's two examples, two anecdotes about what European countries, in this case, are expecting you to done about your movies, about your subjects.
I have something to say. Like, can I say something?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Please
so yeah, like just for example, I was editing with a European producer, and I had a highway in Tehran in the shots, and I was thinking that I should include it in the movie. The characters were in a car in a highway going somewhere, and then the producer said that no, but this highway looks like Sweden. It's too nice. We can't use it. This is not how our people imagine Iran. Like, you're like, okay, sorry, or an elevator in Kabul. Like, no, our people don't think that there is an elevator in Kabul. Like, they didn't like it. Like, you should just be like dusty, and everything should be. You can't have a nice highway. Like, so it's like we should make movies to agree with somebody's image about us. Like, it was a very weird experience. I mean, like, many times, like, okay, sorry, we can't have a nice highway.
Yeah, it's certainly something the festival that I co-founded and focuses on work from the Caribbean, and it's so often, you know, I guess I'm saying I'm certainly familiar with how a particular space can live in the popular imagination, and how maybe funders or audiences expect to see it a certain way over and over again. So it's really, you know, I have to applaud all of you for doing, you know, such stellar work to, you know, bring the truth of your spaces to audiences in such a no, I don't want to say pure. I don't like that word too much, but in such an honest way, you know. Such an honest way.
Can I reply to the question from the chat, please? I see there is a question about the safety.
Oh, that's strange. I'm not seeing that question. Oh, I'm not seeing that, but yes, if you can.
Yeah, it's a very good question and very important, because even before Russia invades Ukraine, but Jenna already got into politics. We were, one of the most important thing was the safety of her. So anytime when we were going on any politically charged actions, I was talking to lawyers and trying to kind of predict what could happen if we got arrested. And
I'm sorry,
yes.
Agnia, could you just repeat the question? Because I think not everybody has seen the, yeah. I'm not seeing it on mine.
Question says, can Wyndham team talk about the issues of safety? How do they deal with danger for them and for their protagonist? And how will that shape their story? So speaking about the last part of the question is, well, it drastically shaped our story, because we, when Jenna went on her last political action right after Russia invades Ukraine, she got arrested, and then she had a trial. And after that, we decided that we have to relocate her from Russia as soon as possible. And in fact, none of this was planned, obviously. And the final scenes of the film are happening according to what we had to organize and live through. So sometimes whatever you imagine as a final sense of your film, it can be changed in one day. And that's what happened to our story. But all the way through, it was even, you know, if Jenna would decide that she goes and does what she wants to do, my personal concern was that, you know, that we try to think all kind of scenarios that can happen after that or during that, and that in each of them we have the way out and the solution, or people who can help us and things like that. So I think it's very important to have not only one, you know, not only one solution, but to try to think at least 2 or 3, and to prepare everything, to who to call and what to take with you. You know, when we were shooting all the on the meetings, I was carrying all the needed clothes, for example, for Jenna to change, because if she's arrested, she's in, you know, in the duct tape, or she's in barbed wire, completely naked. So she needs to change, and she, you know, things like that. So we try to think a bit in advance of everything what's needed if something goes wrong.
Well,
yeah.
Rokhsareh and Boris, anything regarding safety that you wish to speak on? And I should say, if there are, I think I'm not seeing all of the questions in the chat on my end. I don't know if somebody is able to farm them to me. I want to make sure we don't miss out.
Well, about safety, there is something changing in Cuba right now. It's the way authorities are controlling what is done by who. And something that broke when not just filmmakers, but artists in general create a movement and try to protest officially. And after that, the way the government are trying to control everything. For example, the only festival for independent Cuban filmmakers who exist in Cuba was canceled because of difference about what filmmakers want to do with the festival. For example, La Muestra Joven, organized by the ICAIC, of course, but when it was too much for them to accept certain aspect of filmmakers were asking for, they just canceled the festival. And of course, it's not as in the Russian example, but it's not for the making of the movie, specifically the safety problems, but when they get conscious of necessities of what they want to change in the country. Yes, a lot of artists and filmmakers especially were in prison. They don't have the rights to get out of their places, they are on extreme surveillance. So yes, it could be difficult to take position about your art, because something I want to say, what the artists were asking for was always related to creativity subjects, what they can do in what terms, and it's the kind of things the government doesn't accept. So it's about reivindications that the government say, okay, you don't have right now the right to talk really. You don't. You will not find a tribune, official tribune, to talk about your problems. And yes, it could be very difficult. That's the reason why a lot of people are leaving the country, because their space of expression is reducing progressively, reducing. So they don't have the right to express themselves with freedom, and especially they are losing the faith to have the space to create too. So it's very difficult to stay there.
Right.
And for the government, it's easier to send these people away, or to let people go away, because it's one less problem to manage
Right.
inside the country.
Yeah. Rokhsareh, we have a comment here. Somebody is thanking you for being so candid, saying that even as a documented immigrant working in the US, they can relate to your pain and wish you had a better experience, but here in the United States, but so glad that Europe has been more welcoming to your process. Can you speak to whatever degree that you are able about your new projects? And I believe that you are filming in Iran again, and
I'm filming in Afghanistan. I mean, I'm filming under Taliban regime, so I might go. I mean, for now I have a cameraman there, but I'm needed there, so I have to go for now. And then yeah, I'm developing a movie in Iran that at some point I should go there. So yeah, I'm doing all this, and yeah, safety. It's like mental health. I still don't know. I mean, I don't know what safety. But I want to talk about my colleagues in Iran. I want to talk about Baktasha Abtin, a documentary filmmaker who died in custody. He got arrested for making the documentaries. He died in custody 6 months ago because they just didn't give him any medical help, and he died. It was a very good documentary filmmaker and a good person. Now we have Muhammad Rasulov, Jafar Panahi, Mustafa Al Ahmad in prison for making movies, or sometimes just for commenting on the social situation. And many times, many documentary filmmakers in prison. I haven't been in prison. I have been only like my passport has been taken from me and things like that. But yeah, we had about safety in Iran. or in Afghanistan under Taliban or anything. When I was shooting in Afghanistan in 2015, 15 suicide bombings happened around our hotel. So we're just working in a dangerous zone. So yeah, and then when you get out, things can get only worse. Like many people still stay in these countries because they know if they get out, there's nothing for them to do and they can't continue their filmmaking. You know, what can you do in the US? So they stay in, they risk their lives, they risk their safety and everything just to continue being a filmmaker.
It's not just you, it's also your family. Am I right? That it's, you know, so often we speak about, you know, our safety, your safety, but there's also that of your family, you know, who may not necessarily be involved with the film, but is still connected to you. And there's so many considerations one has to take into account.
Yes, for example, there is a subject in Cuba is that your own family is functioning as a censorship, as a censor for you, because they are worried about your security. They are asking just to don't do that, don't make a film about that, don't come back. These kind of things come from your own family. It's a kind of polarization about what in the society, about people who still support the government and people who doesn't. It's a real social issue for make films or make art in general, what you can express and how your family function has essential too.
Yeah. Well, we're coming up on time here. We're about to close out. I just kind of want to go around and see if there are any closing remarks each of you would like to make before we go. And Igor, anything you'd like to say before we close?
Well, I mean, there was someone was trying to ask this question a few times. Can either of the Russian participants explain what the average Russian people think of the war in Ukraine, if they're in touch with people who still live there? Quickly to say that, yes, we still have people both in Russia and both in Ukraine who we know and our friends. During the wartime, it's really such thing as a public opinion during the wartime is really hard to measure. It's really hard to know. Whenever someone comes to you with a question, what's your attitude toward the war in Russia, right? Obviously, out of fear, the answer is not going to be whatever it is, you know, whatever it might have been in a different situation. So it's really hard to measure what average think. All of my friends are obviously against it. When Russia started mobilizing people just a few days ago, 300,000 people left the country. And I cannot speak for them. I've left myself many years ago. But I also, you know, as much as I do feel for them, I think I feel more for people in Ukraine who are getting killed every day and bombed by the Russians. So it's really hard to say that, oh, you know, an average Russian thinks, you know, supports the war or is against the war. It's really hard to measure it now. But so far from the circle that I have, that I'm a part of, everyone is against it and is terrified.
Agnia, any closing remarks? And I should say for both of you, I'll also ask all of you where we can also see your films.
I can say that the recent situation increased, you know, this type of questions as well, because, you know, from my point of view, on one side, I can understand a lot of my friends and very close people, also people who are in the film that we are making with Igor, are leaving Russia because they are not going to survive any type of army or war, because it's mostly members of LGBTQ plus community, and we are since days like this on the phone, just trying to understand where it's still possible to cross the border in Kazakhstan or in Armenia or in Georgia. and it's complete madness, as you can see in the news. But luckily, most of the people that we are helping since some days, they managed to do that. And also, I feel responsibility to get involved with this because, you know, especially not because of the film, but still, you know, during making this film, we became so close, not only with Jenna, but with others who are in the film. So I feel as a person, responsibility to get involved. And I think it's very important. On the other hand, it's very hard to say what's the right solution there, because probably if all these people, instead of I cannot speak for, you know, I have to be honest, you know, I'm sitting in Paris and, you know, I'm not in Russia fighting for freedom of dictatorship, you know. It's a very tricky situation, and anything what I can say can be, you know, twisted in so many ways. But I believe that in the end, the people in Russia will finally, through all this time and horrible situation in Ukraine, when people are really dying there, would understand that the core of the problem is that we cannot unite and fight against the regime, and probably, you know, it can start from the very small actions that each of us would take. From my circle, for sure, everybody's against the war, but right now it's not helping. You know, you can be against the war, but if you don't take actions, then you're just going to be against the war, and the war is still going. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Rokhsareh, any closing thoughts, and where can we see your films? Oh, you're still muted. I was just asking if there were any closing thoughts before we wrap up, and wondering where the audience can see your previous work.
Sonita, I don't know if it is this, was on Canopy for a long time. I don't know if it is still there, but should be at many platforms online. I mean, it was, I don't know, it was on Netflix, but it's not anymore. But it should be in Canopy. You know, Canopy, this library platform, which is accessible with a library card in the US.
Right. And Igor and Agnia, where can people see your previous work?
My previous film you can watch on Ardoc Media website. That's all what I have.
Yeah. Some of my previous films you can see on my web on Vimeo. Some of the short films on Vimeo, and Welcome to Chechnya is on HBO in North America.
Boris,
Yes, about Abyssal, we are finishing the festival's exploitation, so it will be soon in normally in a platform called Guayaba. It's a new platform about Latin American cinema, and will be abroad. I don't know. We are still looking for places to show the movie, to show the film.
Great. Well, I have to thank you all so much for being so vulnerable and forthright, and also so brave to do the work that you do, but then also to speak about it in this way with so many people who are tuning in with us today. To the audience, I would ask you, you know, so much of what we're hearing today is just the need for ongoing and empathetic support. And one of the first and most direct places that can come from is you, the audience. So please watch their work, please share their work, please learn about the communities that these filmmakers come from, and find other filmmakers in their communities and watch their work and share their work and keep it going. And that creates the tide that we're all looking for, that can in part help change the circumstances in which these filmmakers work. So thank you all for joining us today. Thank you to our filmmakers, and thank you to the IDA and to Getting Real for hosting this panel.
It was a pleasure to be in this panel. It was a very unique topic. Nobody else ever has even approached this, so it was very nice to be in this panel. And yeah, thank you.
Well, thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you so much for doing this and for inviting us.
Yes, thank you very much for having us.
Thanks.
Thank you, Rokhsareh, Igor, Agnia, and Boris. Thank you, everybody, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the day of programming.